friends, and a warm welcome to the World Auto Forum Gurus Live episode number 20. Today, we shall be discussing a very important, contentious, and yet a very relevant topic, and that is the future of mobility. Is it going to be electric vehicle or FCEV? And here, I would request Team World Auto Forum to share the program details, please. So, friends, as I mentioned before, this is the WAF Gurus Live 20, part of the WAF Gurus Live series, which started last year. And in the very first week of the lockdown itself, which was the month of March, and you wouldn't believe it, by August 2020, we had more than 1 million views of the WAF Gurus Live. There really couldn't be a better time to get these auto gurus together, as electrification and mobility is clearly a global phenomenon. And looking at the challenges that we face in adopting this, can fuel cell solve the future problems of electric vehicles? The topic that I mentioned before is the future of mobility, EV or FCEV. And to discuss this evening, we have a very impressive lineup of speakers. First, Shivalik Prasad, who's currently helping build the new automotive software platform across global OEM in building an ecosystem around new technologies, especially around the cloud, internet, and mobile technologies. Shivalik holds a record of building maps, navigation, and GPS products for 18 automotive OEM in the Indian market from the scratch. He has closely worked with the world's top 5 tech companies from Bay Area and helped them launch India products and delivery centers. He has executed large multi-million-dollar deals in China, Japan, India, Germany, South Korea, and USA. He's also been a senior consultant with IBM New York in the auto and pharma verticals. Our next speaker is Vinay K. Piparsania. Vinay is a global automotive industry veteran who's been associated with Ford Motor Company for 20 years, taking charge of international marketing, sales, and service responsibilities in India and abroad. He is the consulting director, automotive and counterpoint technology market research, the founder and principal of Millen Strat Advisory and Research, and also the first CEO of the recently established IIT Delhi Endowment Management Foundation. He holds a mechanical engineering degree from the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, and he's an MBA from Tulane University, New Orleans, United States of America. Next speaker is Dr. Ajit Kumar Jindal, who's currently advisory e-mobility and new products technology at Tata Autocoms Limited. Dr. Jindal has Tata Motors Engineering Research Center as advisor, electric and defense vehicles, as well as head engineer, commercial vehicles. Prior to Tata Motors, he's worked in senior positions at Swaraj Mazda Limited and Eicher Motors in the areas of vehicle and engine design. He holds a postdoctoral degree in IC engines and is a chartered engineer and a fellow of IMEC-E, a member of Society of Automotive Engineers, USA. Wow, really impressive. Avik Chattopadhyay, who has an experience of 22 years in the automotive and oil and gas industries. He's been a part of 5 memorable product and brand launches: Maruti Zen, Altex, Mobil, Maruti Suzuki Swift, and Apollo Tires. One IPO, Maruti Suzuki. 3 mergers and acquisitions: Exxon Mobil, Apollo Dunlop, and Apollo Redstein. Wow. He's a global consultant offering strategies and solutions that go all out to transforming brands to transform businesses. And then, of course, the man behind this show, Anuj Guglani, who's the founder and CEO at World Auto Forum, which connects the auto and mobility industry in 125 countries. He's also been the CEO at ACE at Work, a consulting firm for training, strategy, and SOPs for automotive companies around the world. He's also worked with Honda Cars and General Motors at India. He's also the founder of MotorUncle.com, which is a web app for the confused car buyer and hassled car service customer. A graduate in engineering, he did his MBA from IIT Delhi and studied law at the Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. And now, let me introduce you to annual OEM Gold partners. Morris Garages, MG, iconic British car brand since 1924, taken the Indian market by the storm, known for their four pillars: innovation, diversity, communities, and experiences. A third of their workforce constitutes women, which they plan to take to 50%. Volkswagen, a brand that is synonymous to German engineering, build quality and safety and fun to drive experiences. One of the biggest car makers in the world with 150 countries. Annual Gold Partner, Gallup's Motor, one of the leading automotive retail chains at India, known for their class leading professional customer service and loyalty, representing several leading auto brands like Hyundai, BMW, Bajaj, KTM, Tata Motors, CEV, BW, and more. Once a Gallup's customer, always a Gallup's customer. Annual partners: Focus Engineering India and Focus Technologies Dubai, that offers services like auditing, training, mentoring, consulting, data analysis, market research, business ideas in the field of automotive industry worldwide. K2B Learning, one of the leading players of corporate training, offering innovative blending learning approach, which includes technology-based learning, instructor-led experiential learning through outbound training, and business simulations. MotorUncle.com, a web app for the confused car buyer and the hassled car service customer. MotorUncle.com offers report cards of cars based on top experts and actual user ratings. Annual associate partner, Jubilant Motorworks. Jubilant Motorworks is the award-winning automobile arm of the Jubilant Bhartiya Group. They are known for their professional workforce and memorable customer experience. They represent MG and Audi in several markets at India. Our media partner, Patriot, a newspaper with a fine lineage, started more than 6 decades back by Bharat Ratna Aruna Asif Ali ji. The newspaper is known for their unbiased and engaging editorials. WAF-TV, the broadcasting arm of the World Auto Forum. The very place where you're watching this program, AF-TV hosts hundreds of videos of top industry thought leaders to empower you with knowledge and mentoring. WAF-TV is just a Google away. ExpoSim. ExpoSim is the virtual platform for conferences, exhibitions, expos. It can be set up quickly, works in DIY format, and doesn't need an app to access, and is a device agnostic. So now over to you, Anuj.
Thanks a ton, Kiran ma'am. Really appreciate. Great. So, friends, a big and a warm welcome to each one of you who's watching us on WAF TV right now, all over the world. And of course, a very contentious topic, as rightly said by Kiran ma'am. What is the future of mobility, EV or FCEV? I will quickly, first of all, okay, here's a bump for you. This is what Mr. Elon Musk had said sometime last year, and he continued to tweet in the in the same spirit. So, first of all, so the first point being, do you agree with Mr. Musk? Second, electrification and mobility is a clear global phenomena. Battery, right from mining to acquisition to usage to disposal, is still a perplexing piece and not that environmentally friendly. Then power generation worldwide is still predominantly a fossil fuel dependent process. Can fuel cells solve the future problems of the EV? Should the world directly move to a fuel cell, to a FCEV? What can be the other options? If you don't want to be too topical, if you want to be agnostic of tech, what are the use cases of FCEV versus EV? And of course, what are the inherent complexities and challenges of hydrogen-based mobility? We all know, the world is categorizing hydrogen into blue, green, browns, grays, pinks, turquoise, lots of combination. So what is it, the present stage, how we are acquiring, producing hydrogen, because it is the most common element of the universe, not just the planet Earth. But yeah, in its pure form, it's found very less. What are the processes? What is the future? So a worldwide battery race is on as we speak. So would the fuel cell find a seat at the table? So with this, I stop sharing my screen. And let's begin this discussion and getting Dr. Jindal in the conversation, who has been leading, the ERC on the CV front for decades. So, sir, what is your opinion of FCEV versus EV, especially when it comes to the buses and trucks, the CVs?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much, Anuj, for giving me this opportunity to be present among such a uh, diverse and very knowledgeable panel, and of course your all audience. Uh, I think first fundamental thing which having been involved in all kind of vehicle development, IC engine, then battery electric hybrids, then full electric, and then also fuel cell vehicles. Maybe in India, Tata Motors was one of the, I think I would say, pioneers in developing a fuel cell bus for the city usage. So having worked on all, first, one thing I would like to say is that between B battery electric vehicle and fuel cell electric vehicle, it is not or. If you see the road to fuel cell electric vehicle leads through EV. It's not that they are either or. So they are electric and this thing, because in fuel cell vehicles also the driveline is all electric. So unless you achieve a maturity on electric driveline, you can't achieve a maturity on the fuel cell electric vehicle. So the difference between a battery electric vehicle and a fuel cell electric vehicle is primarily that how you generate electricity, how you store electricity on the vehicle. Whereas in fuel cell electric vehicle, you generate onboard electricity by storing hydrogen, and then through fuel cell you generate electricity and then drive. Of course, you still carry a battery, though it may not be a very large battery, but you still have to carry a battery. So from an engineering point of view, from an architecture point of view, I would say the 80% of a fuel cell vehicle is already electric, or 80, 90, whatever percentage you may try to give, but it is already electric. But why fuel cell the advantage, why we Tata Motor we work for fuel cell vehicle is that if you go back a little bit in history, around 10 years back, the batteries, the future of batteries were very uncertain, and it was a evolving technology. The cost of batteries was very high. I remember when we made our first electric vehicle, we paid almost $2,000 per kilowatt hour for batteries. A huge cost. Of course, fuel cell is also not cheap, but yes, the batteries were very expensive, and then charging times were very high. There was a challenges in terms of that long distance travel was almost unimaginable at that time. That how much battery energy densities were not very high. So that's why the everybody thought that maybe the ultimate is fuel cell, that then you can charge the fill the hydrogen like a gasoline or a diesel, and run for hundreds of kilometers. But what is really the challenges, of course, are there. Maybe in future, I don't want to take the whole time here. We can discuss it in subsequent discussions. But obviously, for fuel cell electric vehicle, there are big challenges, if I may say so. A couple of them are, one is that hydrogen is it's a very delicate fuel, I would say. It's very light. It is not very easy to handle. It can leak, and then of course you have to, then there are, of course, if you do energy balance, so there are a lot of challenges in terms of handling the fuel, compression of the hydrogen to really store with the reasonable amount in the vehicles, and the infrastructure cost. This There are very high, I would say, cost and challenges, because of which the pace of development of fuel cell electric vehicle has not been what it should have been. Fortunately, the batteries have evolved much faster than fuel cell vehicles. The cost of batteries have come very, very drastically down as compared to, as I said, around 15 years back to today. From 15 to 1500 to 2000, it is now in the range of 150, 160. So, which has really made the battery electric vehicles take little bit precedence over the fuel cell vehicles. So, in nutshell, again, I would repeat that the fuel cell vehicles do definitely have a future, provided the challenges which we see today in terms of cost, infrastructure, cost, and how to produce hydrogen. So all these things really make a fuel cell vehicle still a big, I would say, challenge to resolve. So once we do that, of course, then if you paint a scenario for fuel cell, this is the most, I would say, environment friendly CO2, nil CO2, or maybe very little. So no addition to CO2, provided it is produced by either solar or hydro or wind power. The hydrogen is produced by that. Then this is the most environment friendly technology, I would say, which can exist on the earth. So I
Great.
will stop here. Maybe we can discuss more subjects later on.
Surely, surely, Dr. Jindal. So yes, Dr. Jindal very clearly, shared the challenges of hydrogen. But then he also mentioned that if hydrogen is produced in an environmentally friendly way, there can be nothing which is cleaner. And yes, where do we have no challenges? Whether you take a IC, you take EV, you take hydrogen, you take anything, challenges would be everywhere. But if we can select a technology and we can start building an ecosystem which is most environment friendly. For example, something which really touches my heart, on a personal level. You have the IC, there are emissions. Yeah, we can work on Euro 6, BS6, fine. We have an EV where there are no emissions, not depending on the source of the electricity. Now you have the fuel cell. Again, depending on whether the hydrogen is green or blue or gray or black or whichever color. But in a fuel cell, it takes in the air, it needs air. So it takes the air from the atmosphere and it needs to purify that air because it can only serve purest air to the fuel cell and it produces in excess. So whatever air is left unused, it gives it back to the atmosphere. So actually, FCV as a vehicle is also cleaning the air around when it's moving. So it's something which really touches my heart, on a technology standpoint. If you see, and also the battery in a fuel cell, it might be just less than 5% of the capacity, something like a strong hybrid. So the battery component, I personally feel, is a very small thing, a very small piece in an FCEV. The bigger piece which we need to really solve is how to procure, how to distribute the environmentally friendly hydrogen. So with that, if we can come to Vinay, Mr. Vinay Piparsania, who's donned several hats in the automotive industry. He's been an industry veteran, and now the latest the hat that is donning is the CEO of IT Delhi Endowment Management Foundation. So Vinay, you keep seeing so much of technology now firsthand at the institute. What really inspires you towards these latest upcoming technologies? All over to you.
Oh, thanks, Anuj, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be amongst you. The topic that you're bringing about right now, Anuj, is very, as you said, it is relevant. Is it, is it in any way contentious? I don't think so, because it's evolutionary. So if you actually look at the auto industry, go back 100 years, and if you think about even the electric vehicle, if you think about, the time of Henry Ford, and you think about the time when Edison was sort of working on this whole electric motors and other things, all of these guys were working on an electric car. The electric vehicle actually came first. But yes. However, it was the petrol and the internal combustion vehicle that took over. Why? Again, same reasons because of what we're talking about right now. It's about the supportive ecosystem that's required to make this into mass production. See, it's one thing to do the research and the technology development. It's altogether another one to have somebody invest in that technology as an industry and try to market it and bring it into a situation where it could be used safely, productively, and in a mass sort of way, in a very standardized way and a regulated way. So the point is that because of the availability of fuel and the lack of charging stations 100 years ago, and because the cost of fuel versus the cost of the battery overcame, that was overwhelming. We saw patrol cars take over, and that's when the production started, the scale started, and after that, there was just no way electric cars could keep pace, and it just kept falling back. And it's 100 years later that it's becoming relevant again, because it's, the collateral damage to the environment is now being very rapidly felt. So unfortunately, I think all of us in the auto manufacturing, all of us in policy, and we were talking about this earlier, we are reactive. And it always comes down to cost. Even though we all agree and we've all come to the conclusion that this technology is the cleanest. Why? Of course, hydrogen is the first, the earliest element in the sort of periodic table. We know that. But the point that we're making here is that how do you actually bring the cost? How do you bring the sort of the collaboration for everybody to start investing with a common direction that we are going to make this work? Now, if you think about it, it's not going to happen at this time. Yes, you will have fuel cell cars, but it'll be much, much later. What is happening right now is that we got auto companies who are in a state of transition. So you got all the manufacturers and have been a part of all these changes. The thing is that we talked about this happening years ago. Where were we going to place our bets on? Are we going to place it on electric vehicles? Are we going to place it on fuel cells? A number of sort of lab testing and all those were done. The point is that the safest and the most scalable solution was coming from the electric vehicle. And the point is that we didn't have to work out sort of a distribution or a manufacturing sort of collaboration or investment in hydrogen. Electric grids were already there. So it was just really tapping onto that. It was just finding out how to distribute that and then come up with a sort of a sub-solution which would then keep pace with whatever was the volumes that are projected. If you think about all the announcements that you've heard from all the major auto manufacturers, take it VW, take it BMW, take it Ford, take it General Motors, everybody is committing to electric vehicles by 2030. So with that kind of a commitment, there is no way they're going to bifurcate their financials and their capacities to this will go into fuel cells, this will go into that. No, I think each player is going to take their choices. And just like the way electric vehicle happened when the time when everybody was internal combustion, a new player who doesn't have those legacy costs or any of those capital investments already in place trying to recover that, they're going to come up with a solution and they're going to move forward. This is exactly what we're seeing right now in the fuel cells. You have a few new players coming, and it is in the commercial vehicles. Why? Because there, the cost equation works out the most relevant, and it works out, there's a business case which becomes fairly relevant for them to consider to go, to move and progress to. So think about it again. All auto manufacturers that are new right now in the electric vehicles, they're going to stick to that. They're not going to change track so rapidly. Even if they do make investments, it'll sort of mature maybe 8 to 10 years later. So let's talk about 2030. Will the internal combustion engine go away? As you saw, performance vehicles are already saying that we're not going to. BMW says, yes, there will be a world where we will have both. While we're going electric, we will continue to have high performance vehicles, which are going to be internal ICE engine, sort of strategies. And we are going to, India, this is a global scenario. India will always lag behind. Why? Because clearly the capital investments are high. The overall infrastructure, we have different priorities right now in our country. So these are going to take, we can talk about it, we can allocate funds for it, but for it to be mass and effective and to be sort of, really implemented in a mass scale way, it's going to require a lot more work. And we are going to follow a lot of the global standards rather than try to develop them on our own. So we may be pieces of it, but when it comes to the fully integrated solution that's going to come, that's going to be really going to take a lot more collaborative work. Hydrogen stations, look at Germany, which I think today is the sort of the one country that has the largest. It has both electric vehicles and it has the highest number of hydrogen stations in the world. And how much are those? Less than 100. Okay. In the case of your electric vehicles, it's taken about 10 years. Now they're getting into, sort of tens and thousands of charging stations. So clearly, EVs are going to be the way forward. Just like Mr. Jindal said, we're going to see EVs be the path going forward. We're going to mature into that. It's going to be all the other auxiliary systems that will come. And after that, once we have brands and technologies that are sort of going to be really the ones that are going to own this, they're the ones who are going to take the lead and move over to fuel cells. Sure. That's the way I see this progressing, Anuj.
Sure thing. That's a very valid point. So as Vinay mentioned, that it all boils down to the ecosystem which gets built and also the companies which are investing in the technology, and 8 to 10 years is easily the horizon. So we can also say that the next Tesla might not come from a Tesla. It might come from a company which might be talking about hydrogen. So with that, getting Avik in the conversation. So Avik, you are one person in the industry, whom we all look up to as, of course, knowledgeable, very articulate, and extremely fearless. You just speak your mind. So first of all, something on what Mr. Elon Musk mentioned in his comments last year on fuel cell, and also how do you see EV, FCV, or both panning out in the industry?
See, firstly, I mean, Mr. Musk is Mr. Musk. I mean, nobody denies him his place in the sun. And now it's not even the sun; it's somewhere else in the galaxy. I think where he's planning to be. But I think he was talking about the stock market when he said that any fool, it would be only a fool who would sell FCEV stocks, right? I don't think he meant that only a fool would sell FCEVs, right? But anyway, uh, uh, yes, I mean we've had Dr. Jindal, we've had Vinay sir, very very nicely articulating the future. And to me, I strongly believe in one in one reality, which is there cannot be any energy or propulsion system in the world which is actually zero impact or zero emission. Cannot be. Okay, the nature of creating an energy system to propel something which is man-made, okay, inherent in it is actually depleting some resource, right? And you're depleting more than what you can actually give back. So if you're talking even about solar, and if you're talking about wind, and if you're talking about hydro, you will be making massive wind turbines. Okay, you'll be using a lot of metal to do that, right? The entire manufacturing process of manufacturing wind turbines would be polluting enough, right? If you're manufacturing photovoltaic cells at gazillions of capacities, the process of manufacturing photovoltaic cells would be polluting enough. So let's actually not kid ourselves that electric mobility is clean and hydrogen is going to be cleaner, and tomorrow I don't know titanium may come which will be the cleanest. Nothing. All we are trying to do is we are trying to reduce the deliberate negative impact that we've had as consumers on the environment. Okay, I mean, as we were just discussing, in a country like ours, where 20% of even the fossil and the coal-based electricity generated is lost due to transmissions and distribution, it just tells you that even the existing systems can be made much more efficient, right? It is somewhere a lack of whether it is deliberate or it is just simply callousness, but the lack of bringing in efficiencies into our systems also leads to huge level of energy losses, right? I mean, we are a country which generates 70% of our electricity through coal and fossil fuels, and then we import coal because the coal that we have in our country is very high ash. Okay, and therefore the entire process of coal power generation is very, very wasteful, it seems. The one thing I want to highlight here is, and as Dr. Jindal said, and Vinay said, this decade is the decade of electrification. Nobody denies it, right? The next decade is going to be the same electric guys are going to become really big, right? They're like tomorrow's General Motors, they're tomorrow's Fords. They're going to become mammoth, they're going to become bureaucratic, they're going to become process driven, they're going to lose their edge of disruption. And then tomorrow's Tesla will not be a Tesla. Tomorrow it will be called something else altogether, right? Because Tesla will become very large, they'll become greedy, they'll try to be monopolistic, they'll get into cartels. They want to keep electricity alive, just the way electricity was killed by the fossil fuel guys in the late 1800s and the early 1910s, 1920s. The same way, the electricity guys who are today are your mavericks, tomorrow will actually become the monarchs, and they'll become so large they'll form a cartel to keep the other guys out. So and this is the cycle of life. This is bound to happen. Okay, therefore look at people 20 years from now who would be the next someone who will again come and disrupt, and that is what actually keeps us alive, right? The one thing I would like to, I was reading a report, a very interesting report by Polestar. Okay, Polestar is this division of Volvo that all of us know, right? They're into manufacturing performance electric vehicles. So they've just released the Polestar 2. They did that, I think, towards the last quarter of last year. and they actually released a report, okay, which was so interesting because it said that it takes 112,000 kilometers for a Polestar 2 to finally overtake, okay, or finally come below the greenhouse gas emissions done by a Volvo XC40. Now, this to me was really, really interesting because they're saying, guys, let's get realistic. Okay, it's not just as to what the vehicle is emitting. Let us put into account all that's gone behind putting in the stuff which helps you emit less in the vehicle. So as you talked about the batteries. Okay, I mean, you're talking about cobalt being used here. 50% of the cobalt comes from DRC, some southern part of DRC, right? 60% of the world's cobalt is used actually by the battery manufacturers. And there is complete violation of human rights when it actually comes to mining cobalt in DRC or in most parts of the world, right? Similarly, the amount of thermoplastics that you use in manufacturing the battery packaging and the battery cells and the pouches and the prisms. I mean, I remember having read a report by the University of Stuttgart where they said that, if this were really to multiply and magnify in the way we are saying, we would actually be using more of petrochemicals, okay, than what we are using right now. So the jury is out, okay. It is inevitable that it is going electric. But then give it another 20 years, there'll be someone else who will come in and they'll actually want to disrupt the entire system. Just that the gestation periods are getting shorter, and even let's say the periods of rule, okay, as to how long you're ruling, they're also getting shorter.
Absolutely. So when it comes to the battery piece, so we all know that, whenever it comes to the cost of acquisition for an EV, even now, the biggest deterrent is the battery cost, the battery size, the kind of geopolitical scenario which is getting built, who owns the maximum cobalt, lithium, resources across the world, how the mining is done, as Avik rightly mentioned, there's a gross human right violations. So battery in itself, right from the mining to the acquisition to the usage to the disposal, in itself is a pretty tricky piece. If hydrogen can help us replace it, simplify things, help in lower the emissions. At the same time, people say that, hey, if you use hydrogen, there is a 70% reduction in efficiency right from the moment you extract to the moment you are refilling the vehicle. But then the people say that, hey, it is 3 times more efficient than an IC engine. Then people say, hey, you need less than 5% of the battery size in a FCV, because you are recovering energy and you are just using for idling and maintaining the power and torque transmission. So the jury actually is out from both sides, and possibly I think what Vinay had mentioned that whichever ecosystem is stronger possibly might take away the cake. So right now everybody, right from the governments to the lobbyists to the companies, everybody is investing in electrification. So that might be the flavor of the decade. But can we be ready for fuel cell? What we need to do, how it will get disrupted, the next Tesla coming from a fuel cell, because Mr. Elon Musk has simply dismissed it as what we have just seen. So getting Shivalik in the conversation. So Shivalik, you have been, the torchbearer of technology. You have done so much of business. You have done business development. You have sold businesses left, right, and center. From a pure, business opportunity standpoint, what is your take on fuel cell versus EV?
There is no right answer or wrong answer, right? Every forecast is wrong. That's one of the things I learned in college. Forecasting is always wrong. But my 2 cents, and then thanks for having me on the forum. Um, Anything that is sexy sells, okay? And if you look at Nokia mobile phones, it had whatever 90% market share. Along comes Apple, everyone laughed at it. I remember there was a report from Morgan or Merrill or Goldman, one of these guys, and said, they will only sell X number of mobile devices, and they removed buttons, and they basically went into a complete touchscreen phone, and many of us bought those phones that time, iPhone 1, and they made an app store, and the world changed as we know it, right? uh, Nokia, BlackBerry, etc. died. We all went into a touchscreen phone, and Apple was supposed to be a limited product device. It was only supposed to be for some, rich people, right? Today they have a billion connected Apple devices, real time, across the globe, right? So everyone's income has gone up. The world GDP is growing. So it's very difficult to predict, right? That's one. Second, if you look at automotive, I think we have to break our discussion down into India and non-India. India is a very unique situation where we have bullock carts, cycles, rickshaws, BMWs, Ferraris, everything goes on the road here, right? It is not like Germany and it's not like Japan. We are not as regulated, neither as disciplined, even though the government tries to make us regulated, but we always find a way around it. So in India, it is not the sexy that sells, it's the convenient that sells. And anything which is convenient does well. So if you look at Indian electricity network, for example, in the British times, most of the towns in India had their own power plant across the country, right? And after independence, most of these power plants were nationalized or they shut down, and we all went to a national grid, except for the city of Mumbai. Mumbai still has its own Tata power plant. It's a dedicated power plant for our own city. We'll never lose electricity. We've never had electricity problems in this city, right? It's a dedicated, defined power plant. Most of the even places like Chhapra and Bihar have their own power plant, and you can search this on the internet, right? Along came national grids. Now, this whole concept of fuel cell, why is it coming up? So if you notice, if the fuel cell becomes competitive, the oil companies become irrelevant, effectively, right? And they are a large business. They are trillions of dollars, not even billions, right? So they need to find a new fuel to sell. So hydrogen works well for them. They have to put up mega plants, mega amount of investments. Again, you need to put up petrol pumps, which they already have. They have to just retrofit and convert. So that's a path that the oil majors will get into it, because that's a business model that they understand, right? My take is, from an Indian perspective, if you look at electrification, and I think I was talking to one of you guys, was India bought, if you look at e-rickshaws, 1.6 million e-rickshaws have sold in India. 1.6 million, right? And that's an insane number. It doesn't even come up in any of the CM reports. It doesn't even show up in any, we said 2000 and 3000. It's 1.6 million. And this is a BBC number that I saw, right? And more are happening because it's cheaper. It's just convenient, nothing else, right? So convenience overrules everything else. And they were illegal. Initially, when e-rickshaw started in Noida and Delhi NCR, they were absolutely illegal. And, do you need a license? Do you need to register? And blah, blah, blah. And regulations came along. So my take is, from an Indian perspective, as the world starts going towards EV, the cost of lithium will definitely go up, right? As China, turns on the pipe and says we need more and more EV vehicles because we control most of the EV or most of the lithium, the cost of lithium will go up. The cost of EV vehicles will go up. So my take is, in the next 10, 12, 15 years, we will have petrol vehicles. We will also have diesel vehicles. We will have EV vehicles, and we will also have hydrogen vehicles. Hydrogen also will come, right? Why will hydrogen come? Because we have excess electricity. If you look at the power plants in India, if you look at the share price of most of the energy plants or power plants, they are in bad shape right now. The amount of electricity being produced and the amount of demand does not match. We have excess electricity in this country, way excess. And we're going for heavy amount of solar and heavy amount of wind power in a big way. So what do you do with all this electricity? And if your EV vehicle is expensive, then you start this whole same problem that Denmark has right now or Norway has. We start splitting the water molecule and we start creating hydrogen, right? And that is around the corner. That will come, right? And that will not come up with mega companies in India. They'll come up with microgrids. You'll have something in Coimbatore, something in Salem, something in Palghat, something in Bhubaneswar. It will be in different places, small units, where for that small market, you will start seeing these, small mobility vehicles or small low-cost vehicles, which will come up, right? It may not be a top-of-the-line Tata Motors or a Mahindra or a Maruti or something. It will be unknown brands which work well for that local market. It's cost-effective. Exactly what is happening in the EV two-wheeler space right now. Anyone and everyone wants to open an EV two-wheeler company in India, right? So to answer your question again, I think there will be a series from an Indian market perspective. You'll have everything happening. Hydrogen definitely, fuel cells will definitely come in. May not be, they may just start burning hydrogen for all you know. It may not even be, a fuel cell. You may just, like how you have a CNG, IC engine kind of thing. There'll be a retrofitting kit or something, and then you will start burning hydrogen as a fuel, because people will figure it out and then say, okay, there is money to be made here. right? And let's do it only for my tempo, which is running in Bhubaneswar from point A to point B, right? As long as it's cheaper and easier to deal with. So a lot of these things will happen, and there is no right and there is no wrong. Government will try to stop it. They will try to control it. They will say this is illegal. You'll get challans in every corner and every traffic light. Doesn't matter. You move on, and as long as it's cheaper than all of these. E-rickshaws is the best example of what happened to EV, right? Every brand in India is trying to make EV vehicles, but there are already 1.6 million vehicles behind, right? And right, think about it. They're all making 2,000, 3,000. When they make 5,000, 10,000 vehicles, it's a press release. And when Delhi government orders 3,000 vehicles, it's a press release. 1.6 million vehicles are on the road, right? And increasing, right? And it's not even penetrated cities like Mumbai right now. You don't see rickshaws in Mumbai right now. It's still, tier 3, tier 4 towns. So same thing will happen here. And this will happen when Europe goes full steam into EV and the cost of lithium goes through the roof. So all you have to look at is when the tipping point happens is when the cost of lithium will kick in, and it becomes too expensive. And the other thing to note is India is an import economy. What that means is the rupee depreciates by 3 to 4% every year historically, has been and will continue to do. So today, if you're at 72 rupees to a dollar, I guess in another 10 years, we'll be at 120 to 140 rupees to a dollar approximately, right? At that point, when you have to import lithium batteries or lithium as component, it's a different discussion at that point, right? And oil also becomes expensive. So if you have excess electricity from all these off-grid networks, then you start selling it into the grid. And that's already happening. If you look at Goa today, Goa doesn't allow you to sell electricity back to the Goa State Electricity Board. They have too much electricity. They don't know what to do with it. There's no demand. And if you look at the rural villages in India, they don't have power cuts anymore. So everyone has electricity now. What do you do? So your power plants are running at a 50% capacity, and they'll keep falling as you have more and more off-grid networks coming in. So it's a very interesting scenario.
So possibly you can use that excess power to produce hydrogen.
Hydrogen. Yeah, that's exactly what will happen. That's exactly what will happen.
All right. So essentially, it boils down to the source of energy. How you are producing. Like in electric, it boils down to the battery. In IC, it boils down to the price of your fuel. So in hydrogen, it will surely boil down to how you are producing that hydrogen, from where you are producing, whether you're clean, you're not clean. The age-old dialogue of using methane, like even now, 48% of the hydrogen is produced from the methane, using that steam-related process, and it can be clean or it can be unclean. We have landfills, in our country, at so many places, and you have those methane flares coming out at night. You can actually see those flares of methane escaping. That's methane, which is being produced in the landfill. We have not been able to use that methane to convert it into CNG and, run our CNG vehicles on it. As we discussed, CNG still, we haven't really fixed it. What stops us from using that methane from the landfills to produce hydrogen? It's a sitting opportunity. We just need to wake up to it.
Because my take is because there is no technology that someone can spend 20 lakh rupees and make money out of it. Okay, it needs hundreds of crores of rupees to set it up, which obviously you will never get bank financing for that. Banks itself are in bad shape right now. So if there is a technology or there is a mechanism by which you can put a small amount of money and convert that, it will start happening. Exactly like what happened to mobile phone repair shops. They didn't exist in India. Now you have one in every corner and every nooker in this country, right? Just popped up. But it'll happen. It will happen earlier than you think, right? I mean,
great. So getting Dr. Jindal back in the discussion. So Dr. Saab, after listening to our fellow speakers, what is your take? So as you mentioned that EV is pretty close to FCEV is 80-90% EV, and hydrogen can be the cleanest fuel if done the right way. So what can be your most important submissions? EV versus FCEV or something else?
See, I think listening, I think one point which has come out very correctly and very rightly is that any success of any technology, it depends upon how convenient and cost effective it is. There can be all kind of technologies, as long as it is convenient and available abundantly, easily at a right cost, it will be successful. E-rickshaw, as just now mentioned, is the very good example. And as earlier Vinay mentioned, EVs came before even the petrol vehicles or engines were developed. But the convenience of petrol engines was so that it overtook the electric vehicles much at much higher pace than the electric vehicles. So what I believe is, and I think it has been mentioned earlier also, you see, every technology will exist. As we just now mentioned that there are some places where there is abundance of electricity. In fact, a lot of people, when we were working on fuel cell bus in Tata Motors, a lot of people approached us that can you give us fuel cell bus because we want to run this in some XYZ place. I'll come to that point where they want to run it. But when I asked them curiously that why you want fuel cell bus, they said we have an excess of electricity. Lot of companies who have set up wind, these solar farms, the people who have set up very big solar capacities, they are staring into an environment, the scenario where they will have no use for the electricity which they have set up the capacity. So what they want to do exactly as mentioned just now, that they want to use that solar energy to generate hydrogen, and then use it for either supply it for other industrial uses. There are a lot of industrial uses of hydrogen, and also for the why not for the contribute in terms of the hydrogen fuel cell bus vehicles or cars or whatever. The second aspect is that there will be a, whether it is expensive or there is a cost of infrastructure, but there will be certain places where maybe fuel cell vehicle will still make a sense. For example, there are some projects which are already going on to have fuel cell vehicles in Leh and Ladakh area, which has got abundant of solar energy being thrown at, and water of course is not so easily, but yes, it can be there. So to generate hydrogen from solar in those areas and then run very environment friendly vehicles. So you can imagine, as compared to ferrying the fuel right from the plains or the refineries to Leh and Ladakh, is also a cost to all the companies. So there it will make a sense. The other, there can be many other areas which are very highly sensitive areas in terms of the emissions, or in terms of the availability of the fuels, where if there is a fuel hydrogen is available, it can be made. The second example of that is, like for example, again, why Tata Motors went into making fuel cell vehicles, because when we were talking to Tata Chemicals, they have in Mitapur a plant producing salt and the other chemicals, soda ash plant. Their hydrogen is a byproduct. Today, as I think you mentioned, that it is just being released. In fact, they have no way to really harness that, put that into the cylinders and ferry it to other places. In fact, there was a project run in Tata Group per se, to see that how we can utilize that hydrogen, because it is free. There is no cost of hydrogen. But the unfortunate part is that, and then run the small fuel cell generators, fuel cell plants for running the transmission towers, because they are all at remote places. They don't get either reaching the, again, the electricity is difficult, or there are places where there's no electricity, or there are places where taking fuel is it's a problem, or they are not manned. So such places we tried to get the hydrogen there and run a fuel cell, but again, cost of ferrying the hydrogen was a big deterrent. But maybe yes, those things can be resolved when the other options become expensive. Then maybe this option will become more viable and say practical. So I think the point is that the fuel cell technology as a technology is something which is has been there since ages. I was just reading at some point of time, 1838 fuel cell were invented,
Absolutely.
but it took 100 years to make a practical fuel cell, and then it has taken almost now 70-80 years to make a really good. We have been tracking the fuel cell stack development. So that itself is in fact, it's no big difference between making a fuel cell stack versus making a battery pack, because it all uses precious elements, platinum as a catalyst, and then while in the process of producing fuel cell stack also you need other proton exchange membrane, or if it is solid oxide then you need many other things. There are different types of fuel cell also. So I think the crux of the whole thing is that yes, there will be places where fuel cell today also makes sense, and in the future it will make sense there, because there will be no other alternative. And of course, also today the ideal thing for a vehicle, fuel cell electric vehicle, would be that you can produce hydrogen on board. So in fact, there was again a thought process on that, that can we put a reformer on board on the vehicle? You have to maybe just put a methanol inside the tank, and then from there you convert it into hydrogen on board according to the demand, on demand generation, so that you don't have to do any stocking. Uh, Incidentally, for hydrogen FCEV vehicles today, to compress the hydrogen to 700 bar, which you need to make it really enough, achieve the enough, say, capacity, you need the almost 14-15% energy is consumed in just compressing. So if you compare a fuel battery electric vehicle and a fuel cell electric vehicle, today, if we go through this compression route, assuming that the hydrogen is available through either solar or whatever, without any use of say the other sources of energy, or they are green, so I would say green hydrogen or blue hydrogen, still the fuel cell electric vehicles are only efficiency is only 23%, whereas battery electric vehicle is 76%. So the point would be that the once we have a say technology where you can do hydrogen generation on board, hydrogen generation, maybe that will be the turning point or the tipping point
Sure,
where
sure.
it will really make sense for fuel cell electric. Because
Correct.
the way we are managing the fuel cell vehicles, yes, it is from a pollution perspective, it is great. It only emission is water. There is no other emissions. Of course, apart from that, whatever small energy you consume in creating the other elements,
So
but
possibly,
otherwise, very highly fuel, say the environment friendly. But on if we talk about well to wheel kind of a scenario, then there are a lot of issues per se.
great. So something like a direct methane fuel cell. So possibly CNG just might not go out of fashion. So
Yeah.
Vinay, any technology which you are aware of in your ecosystem, because you are always surrounded by innovators and all the more now. So if we can typically have, somebody can just put in CNG, into the fuel tank, and on board it gets converted into hydrogen, and wow, you have an FCEV working on CNG as a fuel.
Anuj, I mean, I can tell you right now, to say it is one thing, to actually experiment and do it takes a whole lot of effort and a lot of elements to understand, but it also requires a huge amount of research budget. So the real fundamental thing finally comes down to who's going to pay for all this. So the point is that even when it came to, if you see the fuel has been in a country like India, and again, to the point that we were making earlier, we have to take India and the globe, separately. India, fuel has been always government controlled, right? And the fact is that over here also, if we really want to get hydrogen to happen in the future, no private investor is going to do this, because just to the point that we just made, it's just too big a gamble. And it requires too much collaboration and too much of an ecosystem. So somewhere, I think, all governments will have to collaborate together. I think the whole planet will have to collaborate together to sort of move this forward, if it's such a sort of a thing. And I think that kind of vision is required right now to make it. I mean, we're having a tough time as it is, this whole business of carbon credits, all, whatever is the climate agreements, we will need to come to that. But I think to the point that everyone's making here, we know that eventually the world will evolve to hydrogen. There will be pressure points. There will be technology pivots that will happen. But if you want to accelerate it, We will have to start working on that now, which is how do we do exactly what you're just saying? Is it methane? Is it any hydrogen production that we have? We create all the platforms and the foundations for that. Let us start producing the hydrogen. That's the way you made for electricity. Yes, now we have a surplus. Good. Surplus is not a bad problem to have. But the point is that it gives an opportunity. Yes, let's make the hydrogen now, and let's keep the hydrogen. It's storable. It can be stored in tanks. We'll have a whole new ecosystem where safety is going to be another issue. We're going to have the portability of that is going to be an issue. But you know what? It can be worked out if we start having scale. And if we start reading these elements, it will create the opportunity for the next one and for the next one. So let's make that start would be the way forward. Let's make hydrogen the sort of key fluid, the key element that's going to drive energy. That's how it should be treated. And it is something that can be man-made. It is not something that, it is available naturally, but we will have to sort of separate it. It's unlike, fossil fuel, which we have to dig out. You can't make fossil fuel. It took thousands and millions of years. But hydrogen, we can do that. So I think there's a good opportunity. The whole world will have to do it. Science and research will get there. It'll give you small solutions, but to industrialize it and to do it, let's put those elements now, and then somebody will have to make the investments into the huge infrastructure that will have to be required, which will have to be consortiums, and these will have to be government consortiums, not private consortiums.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you on that, Vinay. So possibly surplus power and battery prices going through the roof can be a potent tipping point in favor of hydrogen. So are we getting you back in the conversation? So we have heard this more than once in today's conversation, India and the world and India being two separate. So why is it that we have to discuss India and the world separately? Why are we disconnected or detached in this way? And is this true just for India, or it's like this for most of the world as well?
I guess it's, and even Shivalik mentioned this earlier that, on that same 24-meter road, when you see, say, a Ferrari on one end and, a bullock cart on the other end, and all are actually going towards their own destinations in wonderful, coexistence. Okay. I mean, there is no tension in any of them. The Ferrari driver knows he can expect a bicycle rider to just emerge at any point, at any turn. Okay, the bullock cart guy also knows there might actually be a truck which might come and actually, mow him down. But you're still moving on, and that is what is so special about India. And I guess it is and it is the same with I would say any large diverse, multilingual, multicultural country. I mean, look at the way Brazil has actually had its own wonderful solution with flex fuels. Okay, and they started on this. Vinay would know very well because Ford got into it also, I think, in the 1970s in Brazil with flex fuels, right? I mean, they are talking about E100.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're talking about E100, right? In India, we are experimenting with E20. Yeah, that's what we're doing. So it's just that Brazil decided that, guys, we need to move on that. And as Vinay correctly said, it was backed by the government. Okay, so you have the National Hydrogen Mission, which has been announced in this year's budget, but you've kept 25 crores of rupees. I mean, if you had serious technologists in your mission, that would be 50% of their salaries, actually, annual salaries. Yeah, and you want to run a national hydrogen mission, but when you see when you read the paper that they've set out, I mean, they are talking about collaborations. Okay, they are talking about getting the private sector also into this, but it has to be run by the government. And the government and we as India have to decide that we need to have our own unique ecosystems solutions, right? So India is not going to be away from the world. It's going to be a part of the world. India can also set certain benchmarks, just the way Brazil set a very interesting benchmark. Just the way China has set its benchmark on electric mobility. Okay. I mean, why can't India actually take up this entire challenge and say India will create its own unique solutions when it comes to hydrogen? Yeah, and we are going to move ahead. I mean, somewhere, I guess, in some space of technology, I mean, I guess we can set a global benchmark. And maybe this is the one opportunity that we have. But it will require massive support from the government. Okay, it can't do with paltry budgets, because when you think big, you have to you have to show that you actually think big, and that is important.
Absolutely, well said, Avik. So yes, so the government needs to show its seriousness, and having a good, decent budget can be a good way to begin. And yes, we can actually set global benchmarks when it comes to hydrogen. That's for sure. And if some way we can connect, just the way I remember Vinay at the Pan IIT 2008. I think if I'm not wrong, we had this IIT for ITI program. So similarly, we can have a landfill to hydrogen program, something like that. I think that can be phenomenal. We can kill multiple birds with one stone. We can ward off our diseases. We can ward off our air pollution, methane flares, energy wastage, and self-sufficiency in energy.
No, as Shivalik said, we have to make it sexy. That's when it's going to catch the
And
imagination.
convenient too, right? So Shivalik, your buzzwords have really become famous now. So over to you before we start again with the closing remarks. So Shivalik, what would you like to say? What are the top 3 things we need to do if we really want to be a hydrogen economy? First of all, should we be one?
I think we have to have our own solution for energy. Whether we should be or not be, we will be, because as I said, lithium is controlled by one country, and oil is polluting us. If you're in Delhi NCR, I guess it's tough for you guys. So something has to be done. The only thing is the government has to deregulate. Let small and medium entrepreneurs, the guy sitting in Agra, let him come up with his own little solution. Empower him. And typically what I have seen is, if the government decide and the people decide, it happens. Mobile phone, I think, is the best example. We have the cheapest data plans in the world today. I remember I used to live in the US for a long time, and I had come back to India in 2002. And there was a lot of talk in South Bombay at that time that, hey, we have so many people and we have so few towers. How will it work? We'll always have drop network and drop signal and blah, 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 blah. Right? And, we have 900 million active people on our network. The same, we somehow managed to make it run through a series of spectrums and a series of regulations, and 16 operators to 3 operators, and maybe it'll increase again. So we will keep chugging along. Indians are very entrepreneurial. So as long as the government doesn't come in the way, I think the market will find a solution. That's my belief. Right?
Great.
And low cost solutions.
So as long as the government doesn't come in the way,
government should not come in the way. I have a different approach. I think the government should just set high level policies and put a framework and let the market take care of it. And the Indian market is hyper efficient. It is not super efficient. It is hyper efficient.
Absolutely. So last 15 seconds of closing remarks from all the speakers, if we can begin, and so mobile phone, e-rickshaw, hydrogen. Can hydrogen add to this list in next 5 years? So in 15 seconds, if we can have closing remarks from all the speakers. So starting with Dr. Jindal.
I won't be so optimistic that it can happen in next 5 years, but yes, definitely maybe it has to happen in maybe 15 years or so. And by that time, probably we would have found a solution to produce hydrogen on board on the vehicles, so that you can run your vehicle on hydrogen with 0 emissions.
Great. Fantastic. Vinay, all yours.
I think we're going to have battery electric vehicles first, and then we're going to go over to fuel cells. So fuel cells are there in the future, but we will first have battery electric vehicles in sort of a comprehensive way.
Okay, so you also tend to agree with Dr. Jindal. It's more than 5 years away, say a decade or more.
No, it's the next decade.
Next decade? All right. So Avik, your closing remarks, please.
I think in this decade, what we will see is we will definitely see a disruption from hydrogen, or disruption with hydrogen. It might have its own specific application, right? For example, it might actually come onto fleets, or it might come onto public transport. But I do see a definite disruption coming in with hydrogen within this decade.
Great.
And it must happen.
It must happen. Okay. So Shivalik?
2 points. One is the US interest rates. If that hits 5%, our rupee goes down the toilet. and our exchange rate collapses, our oil prices go through the roof, and so do the battery prices go through the roof, it will force us to look for a new alternative fuel. And it will happen pretty soon because the interest rates in the US are rising after many decades. So
I agree. I agree with you there, Shivalik. I feel that necessity has been the mother of invention. And till last year, no, World Order Forum had been doing mostly, in fact, only offline events. So once we got into the lockdown, within the first week of March, we started WAV Gurus Live. Within 4 months, 1 million plus views, and we are going. There's been no looking back. Twice a month, we are doing WAV Gurus Live, and the acceptance is amazing. So once we reach that point where the battery prices are through the roof, the fuel prices, conventional fuels are through the roof, we have oversupply of electricity, we have to be atmanirbhar, we have to do something different. We don't have any mines of cobalt lithium, so we'll be against the wall. So this just might make sense. So that's my take on it. And thanks a ton, gentlemen, for taking out your time on a Saturday. So Kiran ma'am, over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anuj. I was listening to all the speakers with keen interest, and you know what has impressed me most in this session? That here I've got the top auto gurus, top of the line, automobile industry guys sitting here, and so well qualified with fantastic experience. But what has been their driving force throughout has been their concern for the environment, has been their concern for going green, has been their concern for India's image in this industry, and not so much the profit. Yeah, weighed the pros and cons of every kind of fuel, and I guess nothing is 100% great, and we just go for that and leave the rest. The existing options that we do have, you are consistently stressing on the need and the urgency to work on it. It still has a whole lot of problems with it, cost problems, environment problems, and you people do see a future, if not in 5 years, in 15 years. But yes, you people have sounded very optimistic that India is going to set a benchmark, and India is not in isolation. It is in fact leading the world. Well, let's hope this comes true. And like Anuj said, thank you, gentlemen, for taking time out on a Saturday. You could have been doing just about anything, guzzling beer to going for a drive, but you chose to be here. And well, you made me realize that I am happy with my CNG car. It's not a bad deal after all. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for being a part of this lively discussion.
Guzzling hydrogen
Thank
soon.
you. Yeah, thank you everyone, and wish everyone a very happy Navroz.
All the
Thank
best.
you. Happy
Bye.
Navratri.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to
Thank
meet
you.
you,
Bye.
gentlemen. Thanks.
Stay safe.
Bye.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Bye.
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 Thanks a ton, Jerry sir. Thanks a ton.
Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to everyone. Thank you all
Thank
to
you
all the
very.
speakers. Thank you, sir.
Very.
Thank you.
Thank you.